Hello darlings, I hope you've been well. Today I wanted to film a video on Y2K fashion and fatphobia. When I'm using the word fat in this video, I do not mean it in an insult, I mean it in a descriptive term. Obviously Y2K's come back. The early 2000s was a fairly sexual and visual culture that no one had really experienced before. The early 2000s represented conformity to a big degree. It was really the first era as we know it, with wide magazine distribution, media popping off, celebrity culture, all of that, runway and models and everything. Our culture as a whole was evolving and it was normalizing the scrutiny of like celebrities' bodies. This time it was distributed on a very large scale. The magazines which were body shaming were oftentimes aimed at teenagers. The magazine 17, a lot of the pages were about weight loss and stuff. For the first time you could scrutinize bodies on the internet at a big scale. You could receive more and more media, a lot more messages on bodies. Whilst the 90s were big on heroin chic, the early 2000s was almost worse because it had been pushed a lot more. It was not subtle, the messages that we heard when we were younger. The Y2K era was incredibly problematic. You can't watch a Y2K movie without noticing homophobia, transphobia, sexism or racism. Y2K fashion was created and designed to look good on thin people and bad on big people, fat people. I personally think Y2K fashion looks especially good on plus size women, but at the time it humiliated fat women. There was no like body acceptance back then. Body positivity wasn't like a mainstream thing at all. A slim body wasn't just like an accessory, it was like how you got perceived as beautiful. Tragically, many shops didn't carry any sizes over a medium or a large. Fashion for everyone wasn't really a thing. Celebrities would brag about diets, magazines would share tips on how to do the same, and a lot of them were practically pro-ana tips, even if they were disguised as just diet tips. It's just starvation really. Eating disordered behaviours were practically encouraged. In the early 2000s you were thin or you weren't, and everyone had a fear of being fat because they probably knew they'd get treated badly. Grew up in a relatively fatphobic household. I think most of us probably did, to be fair, and it's just sad to me that teenage magazines were like how to get a beach body. Just the trends alone, like the low waists. I love anything low waist, but if you're not skinny you're seen as trashy. Back then that style wasn't for everyone. Nowadays it's coming back and people of all sizes are enjoying Y2K fashion. So the only thing that I think should come back from Y2K fashion is the aesthetic. I think we should make sure that the deadly fat phobia doesn't come back. The early 2000s did a lot of damage, and you know, diet culture was the most rampant I think it's ever been ever. It's quite interesting because back then obviously having a big bum was considered a bad thing, or big thighs or even muscles was considered a big no. The concept of thick was never a good thing. I feel like I can't talk about Y2K and fatphobia without bringing up Jessica Blair. She's a content creator and she makes videos about fatphobia and Y2K fashion. She's the queen of Y2K fashion. Every outfit of hers is so good. I'll probably put in some of her videos now because she's a queen.
Let's talk about fatphobia in early 2000s fashion. With a lot of fashion trends from the early 2000s coming back into style, I think it's really important to discuss the fatphobia in this fashion era. Popular fashion trends included low-rise jeans, tube tops, tracksuits, and the infamous visible thong trend. These fashion trends followed the heroin chic look of the 90s, which pushed very thin and emaciated looking bodies as the ideal. With this comes the immense body shaming and fatphobia that occurred during this time. It was so bad that actresses like Raven-Symoné and Drew Barrymore were often considered chubby. Although anybody above a size 2 seemed to be demonized, fat people were blatantly ignored. Clothing options for plus-size people in the early 2000s were virtually non-existent, thereby completely excluding fat people from fashion. Even if fat people did participate in these trends, the reactions to their outfits would be completely different. Low-rise jeans are viewed as fashionable and trendy on thinner body types, but they're typically seen as lazy or unflattering on plus-size bodies.
Like I said before, I was using fat as a neutral body descriptor term, not a insult or anything like that. I think the early 2000s was such a war on fat bodies that the effects of that are still lingering today. Fast fashion ain't it, so if you're interested in Y2K fashion I really recommend eBay. Low rise isn't just for skinny people. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care of yourself, eat good. There was something in my teeth. Anyway, chubby women are hot, fat women are hot. That's all I have to say.